To the chagrin of many of the politicians and voters, I am sad to report that there is no middle road on the climate crisis. We will either address the problem meaningfully and in accordance with scientific consensus, or we will not. The statement is not a matter of radicalism, it is a matter of fact, of policy, and of science. And every decision we make between now and in our children's lifetimes will determine how human life will fare, whether we suffer greatly or build together. It is our choice. Deeper still, we don't have to project 1 minute into our future to see that the climate crisis is already here. On this note, I speak to you not as an elected official.
What crisis? What evidence is there that there is a palpable crisis? Global population is at its peak, all-time high. The global economy is at its peak, its all-time high. What is the crisis?
Or public figure, but I speak to you as a human being, a woman whose dreams of motherhood now taste bittersweet because of what I know about our children's future.
Crocodile tears are not an argument.
For bringing their most dire possibilities into focus. I speak to you as a daughter and descendant of colonized peoples who have already begun to suffer. Just 2 years ago, one of the deadliest disasters in the United States struck in the form of Hurricane Maria.
In the history of the United States, or just in the United States? Because if you look at the history of natural disasters, deaths from natural disasters, there is a very clear trend. And I'm not saying that natural disasters aren't increasing in frequency or ferocity, intensity. I'm not saying that either. I'm not taking a position on that. But it's very clear that we're much better able to withstand natural disasters today than we were as a species 50, 60 years ago, specifically because we've had substantial improvements in technology, in productive capability. We've got now the excess wealth to ship resources to disastered areas very quickly. You know, if we're excluding pandemics, which I guess we should, Hurricane Maria was the 7th worst natural disaster in U.S. history.
Change-powered storm killed over 3,000 Puerto Ricans, American citizens. My own grandfather died in the aftermath, all because they were living under colonial rule, which contributed to the dire conditions and lack of recovery. In an awful term,
that seems like a huge stretch. If anything, the fact that Puerto Rico is part of America is going to be a massive boon in terms of resources that are available to them. Poor countries get hit hardest by natural disasters because they don't have the same sort of quality of structures. They're more susceptible to buildings falling down and stuff like that. I mean, most countries around the world would love to be U.S. citizens and be able to move to any U.S. state simply by buying a plane ticket.
Climate crisis's path is first impacting those who have not only contributed to our emissions the least, but have already suffered greatly in the global history of inequality, colonization, and imperialism.
Actually, if you look at the NASA global temperature data, you'll see that warming has thus far been concentrated in the polar region and some pocket here in Brazil and then Europe. But for the most part, the poorer regions of the world have, at least thus far, been spared really much substantial warming. And the reason for this, I believe, is that a lot of the equatorial regions have already maxed out on global warming from water vapor. They're very hot and humid regions. Water vapor is a very potent greenhouse gas. So the way the greenhouse effect works is that these greenhouse gases gather in the atmosphere, and then when the radiation from the sun bounces off the earth, it bounces back because of the gases in the atmosphere. So if you've already got so much water vapor in the atmosphere that it's bouncing back 100% of the radiation coming off the earth, then additional CO2 isn't really going to do anything. It's already maxed out. But when you have these colder, arid regions like the North Pole and like northern Russia, northern Canada, the greenhouse effect is much more pronounced. So that's one reason why we should expect actually less impact on the poorer regions of the world that she's talking about that have contributed less to emissions
upon another. But this is everyone's loss too. And no person is insulated from this reality. Money alone will not save us. And right now, federal governments are failing to act. The United States, to the horror of the world, withdrew from the Paris Agreement. But despite that, many of the other actors in charge of some of the most advanced and wealthiest economies have withdrawn from the agreement in action. Not a single one is on track to meet their Paris goals. Climate change is not a coincidence or a scientific anomaly. Climate change is a consequence. It is a consequence of our unsustainable way of life, because it is unsustainable to organize our society as we have, centered on prioritizing personal gain and profit over any and all human or planetary considerations.
And this is really when you get to the crux of their argument, which is that it's not really about climate change or the environment. It's about socialism. It's about how capitalism is a failed system, a flawed system, and we need government control over everything. That's the whole climate change is just a smokescreen. They're not really concerned about that. They could care less about that. It's about socialism. It's about government control and the ideology of egalitarianism, to each according to their needs, from each according to their ability. Marxism, communism. Climate change is just a rationalization. It's just one of the latest in a long string of excuses for why we need to have socialism.
It is unsustainable to naively believe that building a wall can shield ourselves from humanity's collective destiny. It is unsustainable to promote amnesia around gross injustices and ignorance of our past, to abdicate responsibility simply because it was our ancestors who committed them and not us. Our children bear responsibility for our inaction, despite the fact that they didn't make the choice.
So here's the thing about climate change. I mean, yes, it's ongoing. Yes, the world has warmed about 1 degree centigrade since the industrial era. I don't dispute that. But frankly, there's just no reason for this hysteria that alarmists have been saying that it's going to be the end of the world. There's zero evidence of that. So far, there have been very few consequences to this warming, and even if the world increased another 2 degrees centigrade, it wouldn't be the end of the world. It's a lot better than the world cooling. Every year, about 10 times as many people die from the cold as from the heat. we're in an ice age at the moment, and a warmer Earth is not a bad thing. But long before we would ever reach any sort of crisis point, we'll have already moved on from fossil fuels simply because we'll have new technology available. There is no crisis. This is just a an excuse for higher taxes, for more government control over the economy, for more government power and less freedom for individuals.
And frankly, it is unsustainable to continue to believe that our system of runaway, unaccountable, law-breaking pursuit of profit, whose inequality is so socially destabilizing that it is giving rise to authoritarians who burn our forests and challenge the democracies that listen to basic science, and to think that that has nothing to do with this.
You know, she's just throwing out word salad. Authoritarians who burn our forests, and what has that to do with capitalism? Why do they attack the profit motive? There's nothing wrong with profits. All profits mean is that an entrepreneur has done a better job of forecasting consumer demand and providing people with things they want than other firms. Why do they attack the profit motive? Why is there something evil about making profits? And it's not like, I mean, AOC does very well for herself, by the way.
We must choose whether this
Of course, they cheer the most nonsense line in the speech.
moment will lead us to regression or evolution, authoritarianism or greater democracy, extraction or preservation.
Authoritarianism and democracy go hand in hand. They're the same thing. They're
Our greatest choice is to move towards a cooperative, collaborative world that aligns with scientific consensus, whose economies center and benefit the middle and lower classes and the marginalized, which is to say, most people, and who honor the inherent value of all human dignity and can put everyone to work. And that is what a Green New Deal is all about. Preserving our planet with a just transition focused on economic opportunity, jobs and justice, peace and prosperity.
You see, if there really was a climate crisis, then they would be focused on the climate, on what can be done. You know, we gotta. That's it. That would be the focus. But instead, it's on bringing about this new world order of, you know, of job security, of imposing regulations, and the whole progressive agenda in and using this alleged climate emergency as a smokescreen to bring about policies that they've wanted to enact, but didn't have the political capital to do so. Politicians love emergencies, whether they're real or imagined, because they're an excuse to bring about the changes that they want to make to alter society to their preferred vision.
To do any less is to stall or regress. We have two choices: to move forwards or backwards. Solving the climate crisis is no longer a primarily scientific question. It is now a political one. The scientists have done much of their job, and now it is the time for us to do ours. A Green New Deal centers the leadership of frontline communities, from miners to...
First of all, I'm still trying to repeal the original New Deal, which was, by the way, a horrible piece of legislation, or series of pieces of legislation. You know, prior to FDR's reign in the 30s, the United States was extremely laissez-faire. There was a gold standard, very limited government, no taxes really, not many taxes, and you know, it was I mean, when the United States was founded, when they revolted against the English, this was at the heyday of classical liberalism, and there was a general popular belief in laissez-faire, in gold as money, in all these essential values. You know, liberty was viewed as the most important ends. This was a popular political belief. So the United States was very unique in that regard, in that it was founded in liberty and was a very free society, um, and economically very laissez-faire until the 1930s when FDR introduced the minimum wage. He imposed harsh taxes and confiscated gold, and he really uh, led a change in American political and economic life. And it makes no sense really why you would want to change, because up to then, you know, under laissez-faire and under the political and economic system that had existed since the American Revolution, America had become the richest country in the world by far, the most prosperous, overtaking Britain, which held that title up until the uh, you know up until around the 20th century, maybe a little before that, the turn of the 20th century. So it makes no sense to me. Why would you make this sudden change when things have been going so successfully? Why would you make this radical change? And I think the New Deal was a huge mistake. It The policies of FDR actually prolonged the Great Depression and made it so much worse. That's why it was the Great Depression, not, you know, just another short economic fluctuation. There really weren't any Great Depressions prior to that. There were depressions, economic recessions, starting with, you know, the war in 1812, and and all based on credit expansion, but they were short lived. And but what happened during the Great Depression? Well, first of all, there was, leading up to it, a great amount of credit expansion on the part of private banks, which was enabled by the newly established Federal Reserve System. So the money supply increased by about 15%, or 20 billion. That was not backed by gold. Gold reserves increased by only about 1 billion during this time period, 1920s to 1930s. And this led to a bubble, a speculative bubble in capital goods industries that collapsed with the stock market collapse in 1929, which would have been bad, but not that bad, except uh, Hoover introduced Smoot-Hawley, which really aggravated things, is it kicked off a trade war, and this was devastating to the agricultural sector, which was primarily focused on exports. So led to widespread bankruptcies for farmers, which in turn led to the failure of the rural banks, and you know, the Dust Bowl, and things were really bad for a decade there, and FDR did a number of things to make things worse. Like, he was trying to keep wages up under the idea that people had more money to spend. They would spend it, the economy would get back on its feet. But what it really did was just lead to extremely high unemployment, which made things worse. So the original New Deal was a bad idea. This Green New Deal, also a bad idea, and really just an excuse for progressives to implement policies under
farmers,
the guise of saving the world.
to indigenous communities, working and poor communities, and urban communities alike. Not only because it is the right thing to do, it is, nor because it is where we can find solutions, we can, but also because it is the winning political coalition that can empower change. The Green New Deal is an economic boon for the many that contrasts with the current profits of planetary extraction that benefit the very few. And with that, I think we have our work cut out for us. In this dedication of a world, we humbly ask for a blessing. May we be protected, each and every one of us, and may we be guided in the days to come.
Yeah, that's AOC for you. I mean, bottom line, global warming's real, but it's not a catastrophic threat. And the Green New Deal, it's just the same old socialism, the same old attack on the capitalist economic order. And it's so stupid because socialism is such a bad ideology. I mean, every time socialism has been attempted, it has failed. Meanwhile, capitalism has transformed the world, has enabled the creation of so much wealth, has ended famines, and ended so much unnecessary death, has enabled the global population to flourish as it is, and yet people keep fighting capitalism. They keep opposing the very source of their prosperity, and it's just dumb.